The first batch of files and the expectations on what comes next. Let's bring in Neama Rahmani. He is the president and co-founder of West Coast Trial Lawyers and former U.S. federal prosecutor. We have reached him in Los Angeles. Neama, always a pleasure speaking to you.
Oh, thanks, Deanna, for having me, as always.
I mean, not that we're speaking about anything that's a happy subject, but talk to me about your main takeaways from this batch of Epstein files.
Deanna, Steve touched upon it. I'm very disappointed for three reasons. First, the Department of Justice yesterday said they're not going to meet the deadline. The Department of Justice in the United States is the largest law firm in the world. They have hundreds of attorneys that are working on this case and many agents too. There's no reason they should not have met yesterday's deadline. And not only did they not meet it, they didn't ask for an extension or let anyone know until well into the afternoon. Then when we first got that initial wave of documents, they were heavily redacted. Obviously, I don't know what those redactions contain, but I can't believe that every single one of them is evidence of a victim of sex abuse. And lastly, most recently, Todd Blanche said that the Department of Justice is asserting privileges like the law enforcement privilege, the deliberative process privilege, and the executive privilege. The DOJ was supposed to produce everything without redactions, without privileges. The only narrow exception was to protect the identity of the victims, and this seems to be woefully insufficient.
Woefully insufficient. I do want to talk to you more about there being no eyewitness accounts, which is what you were hoping to see. But I want to talk to you first about what is in these files. There's no shortage of images. Lots of them focus on the former U.S. President Bill Clinton. There are some other names and images. Mick Jagger, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the person formerly known as Prince Andrew. Perhaps no surprise for some people, surprises for other people. What was the thought process behind that from your perspective about the, I guess, choice of which images were released?
Well, Deanna, the skeptic in me says that they produced this initial tranche identifying Bill Clinton, who obviously President Donald Trump is not a fan of. They withheld some of the pictures with Donald Trump. And look, I'm not saying that Donald Trump had anything to do with the sex abuse, but I think everyone agrees that he was friends with a convicted sex offender. So bearing this information on a Friday evening, then, there's other news that came out in the United States, including strikes in Syria. Look, this is bad PR. And I and a lot of people that are covering this case are asking themselves, was this done strategically and in a way to protect the president? Why isn't the Department of Justice, which is tasked with enforcing the law, actually following the law? They're not supposed to protect the president. They're supposed to make the full Epstein files public. This is an issue of public trust and transparency, and sadly, we're nowhere near where we need to be.
Neama, I want to talk to you about that missed deadline that you already mentioned in your first answer. They were supposed to release all the files by Friday. It didn't meet the deadline. The delay now means that the White House is in apparent conflict with law, with the very law that, in fact, President Trump signed back in November. What sort of legal implications could this raise?
Deanna, you're right. I'm in private practice now, but when I was with the Department of Justice, if you have a deadline, you meet the deadline. You don't just miss the deadline and say, you know what, we're going to produce the documents in the next couple of weeks. That's just not how it works under the law. When you have a deadline, you got to abide by it. Here's what I think should happen. I think House Democrats and maybe even some Republicans, they should file a lawsuit this week and have a federal judge here in the United States compel the disclosure. I would also ask that same judge to review the Epstein files in camera. And that's a Latin term where the judge takes the evidence, reviews it in chambers outside the presence of the public, and decides whether these redactions are appropriate. The third thing I would ask for is what we call a privilege log. If you're not producing something, you're supposed to produce a log articulating the legal reason why, so it can be challenged. So hopefully a judge can step in and compel the Department of Justice to do its job, because it certainly hasn't done it so far.
And while we still have you, you brought it up that you used to work for the DOJ. How crucial is it to the U.S. justice system that the DOJ functions as a completely separate and independent entity from the presidential branch?
It is, because It's supposed to enforce the law, and the public has lost its trust in our criminal justice system and our judiciary as a result. Look, I was hired by a Bush U.S. attorney. I stayed on for an Obama U.S. attorney. Obviously, things shifted politically, but our job was to follow the law. And when you have the folks who are supposed to follow the law not doing so, this is how you have a constitutional crisis. So I'm very disappointed. And let's not forget, Deanna, the DOJ, including Bondi, Kash Patel, FBI director, they've been promising to make these files public for many, many months. Congress now forced their hands, and they're still not doing so. So very disappointing for members of the American public and, frankly, people watching in Canada and worldwide.
While we still have you, just quickly, what are some of the other things in the forthcoming batches from the Epstein files that are going to be released that you're going to be looking out for? What would you like to see?
Yeah, great question. I don't really care about the pictures. I want to see the FBI memoranda interviewing the victims of sex abuse. That's what I want. I want the investigative files. And I know we talked about gigabytes. I think there might even be terabytes of data. And the reason I know that is if you look at the litigation between Virginia Giuffre and formerly Prince Andrew and the Epstein estate and the Ghislaine Maxwell prosecution, if you look at the court filings and the correspondence between the lawyers when they're talking about the discovery, they're talking about terabytes, not gigabytes. I want to see videos of who went to Epstein's island. You know, I can always see these pictures. This is not evidence of sex abuse. I want the actual investigative files that I know the FBI has and they have not produced.
Neama, thank you so much for your time and expertise, as always.
Thanks, Nana. Talk soon.
That is Neama Rahmani, president and co-founder of West Coast Trial Lawyers and a former U.S. federal prosecutor.